Today, Lesson 36. Grace notes are basically notes added onto a melody as a sort of ornamentation. They're always written smaller than normal notes. To start this lesson, we're going to look at a very common grace note with a rather intimidating name, the acciaccatura. On the first page of your booklet for this lesson, page 421, you'll find all you really need to know about the acciaccatura. So, assuming that you've read through that page carefully, we'll move straight on to the exercises that follow. And if you haven't read the text yet, then do it now before you go any further. The first exercise, number 345, is written out for you twice, marked A and B. Both A and B are in fact exactly the same. There's no difference at all in the written music. But, as you already know from reading about the acciaccatura, there are always two ways it can be played. So in version A, we want you to play the acciaccatura on the beat, and in version B, after the beat. Here's exercise 345, with the acciaccatura played on the beat. And now the same piece with the acciaccatura played before the beat, so that it's the main note that comes right on the beat. Now try exercise 346. It should sound like this. Exercise 347 is for the left hand. An acciaccatura isn't necessarily just one note. It can be two or more, as you can see in exercise 348. Here's the exercise with the double acciaccatura played on the beat. Now here's the same exercise with the acciaccatura played before the beat. Finally, in exercise 349, there's a three-note acciaccatura, first played on the beat. Now the same exercise with the acciaccatura played before the beat. Our solo piece for this lesson is the first movement of Beethoven's Sonatina in G major. You'll notice the occasional acciaccatura here and there in the right-hand part. It's also worth watching how the phrasing works. In the second bar, for instance, the quavers are grouped in pairs by the phrase marks, and the fingering is designed to bring out this effect. Changing from your second to your third finger on the D, and from your thumb to your second finger on the B, creates the slight break that you need at the end of each brief phrase. You can compare this with the quavers in bar 4, which flow smoothly together, grouped under the same phrase mark. It's also important to bring out the dynamics of the piece, the contrasts of loud and soft. If you look at the last 10-bar section on page 425, you'll see there are 4 bars played mezzo forte, moderately loud, followed by 3.5 bars played piano, softly, and then a final flourish, forte, loud. Bring out these contrasts because they're very important to the expression of the music. So now let's listen to Sonatina in G, played without the repeat of the central section. Sonatina in G by Beethoven. A tremolo is a rapid repetition of notes produced with a shaking movement of the hand. Take a look at example A on page 426. On the left you can see how a tremolo is normally written. The 2 notes involved are shown as minims divided by 2 strong lines. This means that you play the 2 notes alternately as semiquavers for the duration of a minim, as shown in the written out example on the right. Let's hear example A now. All the examples in this section are played with the repeat as marked. There are 2 alternative fingerings for this tremolo, either the 4th and 2nd fingers or the 3rd finger and thumb. To try it for yourself, start by resting your 4th and 2nd fingers very lightly on the E flat and C, just touching the keys with your fingertips. Then rotate your wrist to the right so that your 4th finger plays E flat. Rotate your wrist back to the left so your 2nd finger plays C, and so on. The fingers themselves shouldn't move independently. All the movement should come from the wrist, which sets up a shaking, trembling motion of the hand that produces the proper tremolo effect. Let's hear example B in demi-semiquavers. Example C is in 6/8 time. Example D shows how a tremolo can involve more than 2 notes. The technique is exactly the same, although it's slightly more difficult to get it right. Rest your 5th and 3rd fingers on the G and E flat and your thumb on the C, and shake your hand from side to side to play the tremolo. Example D. By now, your technique and your knowledge of chords are good enough to begin to tackle genuine jazz music. The main difficulty of jazz is that it always requires a degree of improvisation and free invention by the performer. However, all jazz players start by learning some very basic formulas, straightforward sequences of chords and simple repeated patterns of notes, which they master before moving on to anything more adventurous. Of course, different people like different kinds of music. If you're a jazz lover, then you'll listen to the performances of famous jazz musicians and use those as an example to imitate. But every complete keyboard player should at least learn the basics of such an important form of music. That is the most that we can achieve within the limits of this course. We're going to start with a look at the blues, a musical form you've already encountered several times before. As you can see on page 427, the basis for the blues is a normal major scale plus 3 extra notes, the blue notes, that give the blues their special favour. Let's hear the C major scale with the blue notes added: E flat, G flat, and B flat. In its simplest form, the blues works with only 4 chords: the tonic and 7th chords on the 1st degree of the major scale, the 7th chord on the 4th degree of the scale, and the 7th chord on the 5th degree of the scale. So, in C major we get C and C7, F7, and G7. These chords are usually arranged in the 12-bar pattern shown at the bottom of page 427. The second bar is often based on the 7th chord on the 4th degree of the scale instead of the tonic chord, and the time signature may be 4/4 instead of 12/8, but otherwise this identical format has been used in a vast number of blues songs. Try out this 12-bar chord sequence for yourself now. And make sure you're really familiar with this sequence of chords before you move on to the next part of our study of the blues. In the blues, the basic rhythm is usually provided by the left hand. Let's try a few rhythms. Here's example A on page 428. 4 dotted crotchet chords to each bar. Example B has a crotchet and quaver pattern. Example C is in 4/4 time. And finally, example D, with triplets on the 2nd and 4th beats of each bar. Over a bass rhythm like the ones we've just played, the blues performer adds a melody and improvisations with the right hand. Most of the notes for both tune and improvisation are selected from a scale of only 6 notes: the 1st, 4th, and 5th degrees of the major scale, and the 3 blue notes. So, in C major, this blues scale consists of C, E flat, F, G flat, G, and B flat. It sounds like this. This fits very well with the basic chords in a C major blues: C7, F7, and G7. Exercise 350 gives you a chance to practice the blues scale in C major across 2 octaves with the right hand. The note between F and G is written as F sharp in the ascending scale and G flat in the descending scale. In G major, the blues scale becomes G, B flat, C, D flat or C sharp, D, and F. This fits with the basic chords G7, C7 and D7. Now let's hear exercise 351, the blues scale in G. You should be able to make up blues scales in other keys for yourself. For instance, in B-flat, the blues scale would be B-flat, D-flat, E-flat, E natural, F natural and A-flat. If you're going to make progress in jazz, it's very important to practice any scales or exercises in a variety of keys, not just the one they're written in. This applies to all the examples in our next section on blues improvisation. They're all written in C major, but once you've mastered them in that key, you should try to transpose them into as many other major keys as you can manage. Obviously, by definition, an improvisation has to be something you make up for yourself. But practicing certain formulas, certain fixed patterns of notes, is an essential step on the path to successful improvisation. So let's try some examples of ways of improvising based on a blues scale. Example A. Example B includes use of the acciaccatura. This is a very well-known blues effect. Example C introduces a tremolo in the second bar. Again, this is very common in blues performance. In example D, the same group of notes, an acciaccatura and 3 quavers, is repeated 4 times over to build up tension. Repetition is an essential element of blues improvisation. Example D. And now, example E, where the right hand introduces a variation to the rhythm. Finally, example F shows the sort of way blues musicians sometimes end a piece. As you can see, the chords are more complex and varied here. If you can get a formula like this off by heart, and you're able to play it in any key, then it can give a very sophisticated air to your playing. Example F. There's a chance to apply some of what you've just learnt about the blues in our piece with backing group for this lesson, Blues in G. It's made up of 4 12-bar sections. The first and last sections are fully written out for you, with some much more sophisticated harmonies than the ones you've been looking at so far in this lesson. The middle 2 sections are improvisations. The first one is written out for you as an example, but the second has the right hand blank, so you can supply your own notes. You'll hear that the performer on the cassette plays his own improvisation here, and there's no harm in trying to imitate him. The chords in the 2 improvisation sections are played by the left hand as a series of dotted crotchets, 4 to a bar, like in example A on page 428. The chords here are very slightly different from those in the basic blues that you met on page 427. The G7 chord is always used instead of the G major tonic chord, and the last bar in the sequence has the chord on the 5th degree, D7, instead of the G chord that you'd expect. Let's hear Blues in G now, with keyboard and backing. There are just a few points to make about the written notes. Obviously, you need to read the many sharps and flats accurately, and remember the F-sharp key signature. Notice how the right hand goes down into the bass clef in bars 11 and 12 on the first page. Make sure you read these notes correctly. In bars 1, 2 and 3 on the last page, page 432, each acciaccatura is to be played with the second finger, with the thumb playing the main note. This may seem surprising at first, but it is in fact quite easy to do, as you'll soon find out when you try it. Just cross your second finger over the top of your thumb. As for the improvisation, the most important first step is always to get the chords off by heart, so you don't have to worry about them at all. As long as you can keep the rhythm and the chord sequence going in the left hand, you can produce a very effective improvisation in the right hand quite simply. Don't be over-ambitious. Just stick to a few notes from the G major blues scale. What you play can be very repetitive and still sound impressive, especially if you add the occasional acciaccatura and tremolo to liven it up. When you feel more confident, try out some of the patterns that you met on page 429, although you'll have to remember to play them in the key of G instead of C. So now, to end this lesson, here's the backing to Blues in G, so you can add your own keyboard sound over the top.